Welcome to the Business of Esports podcast, where we explore the intersection of business and esports, the fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation. Please welcome your hosts, Arda Okal, William Collis, and Paul Dawalibi. The Business of Esports podcast begins now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Business of Esports podcast. This is where we do a deep dive, get some great opinions on all that matters in the past week in the business of esports. My name is Arda Okal. I'm your host. I have my esteemed colleagues with me as usual on the podcast, William Collis, Paul Dawalibi. We got so much to talk about this week. This was a pretty substantial week in terms of news in esports business. Boys, Paul, start with you. How you doing? What's been happening the last week? Any good news coming out on your personal fronts?
You know, guys, some good news. I think we've got some really exciting guests lined up. I think I'm going to tease it a bit, but I think people are going to be really excited about the people we have coming on the show in the next couple of weeks, next few months, really. So I think that's what I have on my end that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about my shout out on Fox News, Art. I finally.
Whoa! Tell us about that. What happened?
It's not as exciting as I finally cracked that goal. But they did a segment on esports at colleges, focusing on Ohio State. But they were mentioning other colleges that had, very forward-looking programs, and they brought up our work at Becker College and sort of what's happening there, which I was so it goes to show you that anything in esports can get to be national news, because I'm very proud of the work we do for Becker. I think we do something, really special, but I was still surprised to see it getting called out on Fox. But B, it also goes to show you, look, if it's Fox News, that's how mainstream this stuff has become, and I'm still, I hate to say I'm surprised that it got a mention, but I mean, at this point, I'm surprised, some things still catch me off guard, and that was one of them. So
very cool.
Well, congratulations. That's awesome. We're going to have to find a clip of that so that we can share the heck out of it on social media. Speaking of which, exactly.
Arda, I was going to say, we are the Business of Esports, but did you guys play the Anthem demo over the weekend?
How is it?
It's terrible.
Wow, really?
Yeah. A massively overhyped game, and it's basically just Destiny. And I wrote a post on the site talking about how I thought console was dragging down game development, and we discussed it a little bit on last week's podcast. And to me, this was like it couldn't have been a more perfect example of this, right? Like developing for console dragging down the whole experience. It was literally just a Destiny knockoff. I'm really scared for EA right now. Very scared for EA. But I was curious if you guys had played it.
Yeah, I got to play a little bit of it. I mean, I think for me, this is a broader question of, Electronic Arts, I think it was back in 2011, started a strategy of, they felt like as a company, they were starting of sequelitis, and the classic example of that is their EA Sports activities. And so they started a push to create a bunch of original IP, right? And so the classic examples of that are Mirror's Edge came out of the push, Dead Space came out of the push. And I think if you look back on it, that whole original, the EA's original IP strategies have never really worked very well. And in my mind, Anthem even, is just another iteration of the fact that I think EA is really, and correct me if maybe I'm missing something, but I think EA has really struggled for 10 years or more to launch an original piece of IP that wasn't from an acquired publisher. And I think it's just another symptom here.
Well, we have a lot to talk about. You mentioned college esports, William. That's on the docket. We have so much more. I do want to give a shout out. One thing that I was able to be a part of this past weekend, esports related, that was really cool, was the NHL All-Star Weekend happened in San Jose, California. Great weekend, lots of fun, met some great people. But what I was involved with in particular was that the NHL Esports Initiative, the NHL Gaming World Championship, full disclosure, I do play-by-play for that tournament, is coming back for a season 2. And what they did this weekend to create some really cool content was they set up camp in a $100 million mansion, which is owned by Scott McNeely, who sits on the board for the San Jose Sharks and is of Sun Microsystems fame, of course, a giant company. And imagine a $1 billion hockey fan That's exactly the dream house. The house has a movie theater, has a golf course out front, has like 1,000 rooms, giant game set up, and of course, a $500,000 hockey rink right beside the house. So it was like, especially for these hockey content creators, a total dream come true. So they were playing the game, they were creating some fun content. We even had NHL players that were a part of it, and we had some even non-endemic hockey content creators like Glitter Explosion and Seabass from FaZe Clan. Some really great names that were a part of this overall. And so I was a part of it as well. It was a lot of fun. So shout out to the NHL and Esports, and the Gaming World Championship will be returning. Feel free to find us on Twitter as we continue along with the podcast at Biz Esports and thebusinessofelsports.com. Every single day, you will be up to date on all the news happening in the business of esports. We have a lot to get to. Let's start with State Farm. State Farm has been in the esports bubble in terms of sponsorships before. They have sponsored the NBA 2K League. They have sponsored League of Legends. They have sponsored Rocket League. But for the first time, they will be sponsoring a single streamer, and that streamer is Dr. Lupo. The terms were undisclosed, but this is a monumental leap in terms of sponsorship because, like we said, this is a single person that State Farm will be sponsoring. Dr. Lupo is a member of Rogue. Rogue's parent company is Rect Global, who is also State Farm's agency of record. So that could be certainly how that flow chart came to be there. How much does this open the door for other streamers to get this level or this heavy-duty sponsorship as opposed to the leagues, or is this a rising tide floats all boats? Paul, let's start with you.
I think it's a rising tide floats all boats kind of situation. I mean, we talked about Dr. Disrespect last week. And him getting signed by CAA. I think the interesting conclusion is if you have doctor in your name, it seems to help. But Dr. Lupo is such a safe bet. I was actually a little bit surprised to see this. And in fact, a lot of the headlines were just incorrect, right? A lot of the headlines said, this is the first time State Farm's getting into this, when in reality, they've been doing esports more than just about anybody for a while now. And I think Dr. Lupo is just such a safe bet. He's such a safe streamer. It's kind of in line with the State Farm brand. He's a bit older. I'm not shocked at it. It probably wouldn't be the move I would make if I was State Farm, because I don't think Dr. Lupo is that exciting of a star. But it's one of those things that all of these guys who are at the top right now, Dr. Lupo and Dr. Disrespect and all of these big streamers and esports stars, all of these guys are going to have sponsorship and big dollars thrown at them because that's where the audience is, right? So the brands getting in today are going, well, where's the audience? Where are the eyeballs? And let's back those guys. So I'm not surprised at all. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this as the year goes on.
William, like leagues like NBA 2K League don't get the numbers that a guy like Dr. Lupo does on his own, but there's still at least a perceived cachet to be associated with the NBA, even if it's through their esports initiative or something like that. Is this a situation where streamers will just get more of these advertising dollars at the expense of leagues, or will we see this simply be a notification of sponsors throwing dollars at all varieties, streamers and leagues alike?
No, I just think it's really more of a symptom of that, I think it's sort of what you said correctly at the beginning, Arda, here about, Rogue essentially and Rect Media being the agency of record for Dr. Lupo. And, I think it's easier to cut a deal with one person than it is to cut a deal with the NBA, right? And I think if you're somebody like State Farm who's going to make, going to maybe be moving more into the content side, although to be fair, I mean, I think State Farm was like the first brand, one of the first brands into esports. I remember we're partnering with State Farm for ONOG gaming tournaments in Hearthstone when Hearthstone was in beta. I think State Farm's been in this really early, but I think it's easier to cut deals with one person than it is to cut deals with big organizations. And so I think you're going to see these individual deals start as a prelude to the larger organizational deals, which are, I think, by the way, a lot more interesting for a company like State Farm, because State Farm, what do they get from Dr. Lupo? They get awareness and advertising. It's pretty direct. Whereas with something like the NBA, there's a possibility of a much deeper, broader, and expansive corporate partnership beyond just eyeballs. And I think, ultimately that's the more interesting thing. Just like you don't see. I mean, you do see sort of just like you do see football players getting individual sponsorships, but you also see the biggest deals of the league level sponsorships, because we're still in relatively early days here. It's the player sponsorships that are getting headlines, but the league level sponsorships will follow, as you've seen modeled out with the Overwatch League.
Well, we can move on to topic number 2, also dealing with sponsorships. This one deals with AT&T. They are getting back into a partnership with YouTube, but they will avoid gaming content. AT&T Chief Brand Officer Fiona Carter says the company will steer clear of the gaming category due to potentially problematic content. This is from Dexerto. The exact quote is, "Having to have more subscribers and more viewing hours has really helped with eliminating fringe content that we might not want to advertise against. YouTube made drastic changes to its partner program, as we remember, cracking down on what creators are eligible for video monetization and boosting the number of employees that review content." So when you guys read this kind of headline, is this at all a cause for concern? William, let's start with you.
I think it's more like this feels like throwing the baby out with the bathwater here in my mind. I understand that, look, there is a ton of objectionable content gamers put out. There's an undercurrent of toxicity in a lot of the different sub-communities in esports, and it's a huge problem. It's a huge headwind against esports because, you still see mature organizations like, again, the NFL struggle with things, but overall it's contained. And esports is still trying to figure out how to get its hat or its, put a lid on its more unsavory side, so to speak. That being said, my understanding is gaming is like the second or the first most, watched channel or source of videos on YouTube. Just because some gaming content is objectionable or problematic, it seems insane to me to throw out all of gaming content. Particularly because I imagine AT&T is interested in reaching the gaming audience. I mean, it seems to me like, millennials and sort of, Gen Xers or 90s kids are a pretty good market for AT&T to be going after. So I think it's more short-sighted on AT&T's part.
Yeah, I'll take this one step further. I think AT&T is the most clueless big company I've seen in the last 6 months. This is classic big company, total cluelessness. This is AT&T playing defense instead of playing offense. And frankly, what they're doing is they're handing that 13 to 35 audience to their competitors. And arguably, AT&T has not really been competitive in that demographic at all in the last few years. T-Mobile has really eaten their lunch there. But it's such a clear symptom of bad decisions inside of AT&T, and to me, this is the worst of them all. This is basically saying, here, T-Mobile, take the 13 to 35 audience. You can have it. We don't want it. That's basically what this is saying. And it's just it's bad decisions internally and a lot of playing defense internally instead of playing offense. I think this was the most shocking, news piece I saw this last week. And probably the most disappointing announcement I've seen from a big brand around esports in a long time.
How long do you think it'll take for the paradigm to shift, if at all, Paul?
I don't think you can fix bad decision making inside of big companies. I just don't think you can. I think what's going to happen is a year from now, 2 years from now, when AT&T is really starting to feel the pain, they won't realize it's because of bad decisions like this. Like, no one will look back and go, hey, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't have done that, or maybe we should have been in esports, or maybe we should have done stuff with gaming videos. Like, no one's going to look back and have that kind of clear realization of why things went sideways. What I can guarantee is things will go sideways for AT&T on this one. And you're already seeing it. I mean, T-Mobile is literally doing the polar opposite of what AT&T is doing here. They're doubling down on esports. They're more present in front of gamers than ever. They're really doing some very smart things to reach that gamer audience. And frankly, these are the future valuable customers for these companies. Again, it's not pain AT&T will feel today, but in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, they're going to suffer pretty badly because of bad decisions like this.
Last question on this one. Do you believe truly that with the strategies taken here by AT&T and T-Mobile, that this will make a significant revenue impact for both companies?
In the long term, for sure. Huge impact. not small impact, a massive impact. All of these companies underestimate the size of the gaming audience, the disposable income of the gaming audience, the tech savviness of the gaming audience, right? Like, if you put just those three elements together, any company who goes after them in a concerted way, a tech company like AT&T or T-Mobile who goes after this audience in a concerted way, is going to reap the benefits long term. And if you actively tune them out, well, you're going to suffer long term. I don't understand this decision at all. I mean, I guess, like William said, it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I really struggled with this one. I could not figure out what logic was this, because they might get associated with one video that has some objectionable content. To me, this crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I was racking my brains. I was thinking, like, was there a huge scandal with AT&T branding appearing after a gaming video that I completely missed? You know, I was like racking my brains. Like, is there some Tide Pods level incident that I'm not aware of? But I think it's just, it's a case of misunderstanding current market conditions. And I mean, all I can say is, you know, I can't wait to be talking on the podcast next year about AT&T walks back decision to withdraw from gaming.
The irony of it all is, when there's objectionable content on YouTube especially, it's usually YouTube that takes the flack, not the advertiser around it. It's typically YouTube that takes the fall on objectionable content. They always end up looking like the bad guy here. This to me is a real confusing one. I'd love to have people from AT&T on to understand what was behind this decision. And at some point in the future, we'll have to have people from T-Mobile on to really talk through why they see it so differently. Like, to me, the approach is so radically different by two companies in the exact same industry. I think that's fascinating as a study in itself.
Well, maybe they will be guests in the future, like we alluded to, having guests on this podcast. We are endeavoring to bring you some really great guests talking about the business of esports. So keep on the lookout for that throughout the year. I just did a Google search for AT&T gaming scandal, and nothing really came up. So this must be just a internal decision, just like you guys said. But you guys can join the conversation as well, by the way, at Biz Esports on Twitter. Let us know what you think of the topics we're talking about and whether or not you agree with William and Paul's opinions. Let's move on to our next topic. Another company who is actually seeing growth thanks in part to esports. That is Logitech. According to investors.com, Logitech CEO Bracken Darrell said that the company outperformed in the holiday quarter, and that gave him confidence to raise guidance for the current quarter. Logitech, of course, is a maker of PC and mobile device peripherals. In the quarter ending December 31st, Logitech sales climbed 6% to $864 million, outperforming Wall Street's expectations of $860 million. Gaming peripherals grew 23% to $214 million in Q4. Darrell's quote, "This secular trend is a powerhouse." So at this point, these kinds of stories, Paul, let's start with you on this one, really seem par for the course. I mean, we are, for all the news items that we see regarding AT&T and maybe scaling back from gaming, we are also seeing a lot of these investment stories, but also companies that are directly involved in the gaming space are seeing growth, and Logitech is no exception, right?
You know, this one made my week, contrary to the AT&T story. In fact, I had seen the story about Logitech's earnings and guidance, and it didn't come as a surprise to me. I mean, my room here is literally packed to the brim with Logitech gaming products. But it's one of those things where, and so I had the TV on. I had seen the story, and I had the TV on, and it was on CNBC. And Bracken was on, and he was saying, and the exact quote, I don't have it, but he basically said, the esports audience today, not 5 years from now, today, is larger than Netflix, Hulu, CNN, you know, all of these put together. And to me, you know, having a guy like him, CEO of quite a big company, on CNBC saying, wait a second, the esports audience is bigger than all of these things which people think are massive in and of themselves. And it's no surprise then that they've aligned themselves with that market, made products for that market, and are reaping the benefits of that market. To me, this is just really smart business on his part. You know, they could keep making keyboards and mice for offices, but I think what they realized is if they double down in a big way on gaming, which they have, and they've built some really great peripherals for gamers, right? Really designed for professional gamers in mind and aspiring professional gamers in mind. By going after that audience in a very concerted way, and they've started that, they started that really a few years ago. It's not like they just thought about it today. They started a few years ago. They're reaping the benefits today. It's the exact opposite of kind of the AT&T thing, right? Where they invested early on, they recognize the trend, and they know the audience is there. So, the results are there as a consequence.
Yeah, I hate to say I don't have much to add, but I almost vetoed this as a news article today, Arda, because it's just so obvious. I mean, the headline's basically like, company invests in esports. Esports is growing and doing well. Company sees returns. I mean, I know it's important because it's Logitech and it's a significant, outperformance of, Wall Street guidance and all of those things. But fundamentally, this is just another case of, this is a rising tide floats all the boats situation. Being in the space, you will do well right now.
I think we might have to introduce a new podcast segment where we just lump all of these news items like, oh, here's another growth story, here's another investment story into one segment.
There is some worthy discussion here, though. And the question I have for you guys is, when you see stories like this, do you think we're going to see a deluge of companies getting in the space thinking they can make a quick buck by just orienting themselves towards the esports or gaming market?
Now that is an interesting question, and I almost certainly think the answer is yes, because gaming is a space that's very easy to misunderstand. It's a space that has a popular, esports in particular, has sort of a popular culture, appearance in the popular culture of sort of still nerds in basements, which is very different from what it actually is. I think it is only a matter of time. And by the way, we've started to see it. You talked about this with was the hotel chain that ran the terrible commercials for gamers. Was it Red Roof Inn?
Yeah. No, it was Holiday Inn. Holiday
Inn. Yeah. Like we're already seeing it. There are already companies with
that commercial. That commercial was like the perfect example of how not to enter the gaming space.
But like peripherals to me is an interesting one, right? Because what's stopping people from just knocking off Logitech? Like, what is Logitech doing here that others couldn't be doing just as well? Like, for me, it'll be interesting to see the evolution of the industry in terms of who survives, who thrives, and who really falls flat as the thing hits the mainstream. And frankly, there's a little bit of surprise on my end that Logitech has been able to make the pivot that they did, right? Because when I started gaming, and this goes way back, Logitech was not the gaming brand, was not.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it another way, Paul. My question is, when are we going to see not just a mouse built for gaming or a keyboard built for gaming, but a new must-have gaming peripheral? Like a new category that's required for esports. Because I still am a little bit stunned that we're controlling our shooters with WASD. We're using, maybe it's 16-button mice instead of 2-button mice, but we're still using a mouse. The same thing that you originally used to click on WordPerfect. I do wonder about, and I've tried a lot of the category experimental things. I've tried the mini keyboards. I've tried like Razer's Orb Weaver. Those don't work. They're basically smaller keyboards or things like that. But but I do wonder, like, are we going to come to a point where a new peripheral comes into the space? Because that to me is really interesting. Something designed for esports around precision and motion and efficient, powerful hand movement. With dominant fingers, doing dominant inputs and things like that. That's sort of my wonder, because I am a little bit stunned that all the innovation around esports has been making mice, keyboards, and mouse pads better for esports, and it hasn't been rethinking methods of game interaction for a competitive environment.
Do you think that's coming, though, William? Do you think like a revolution in input method is coming?
Can I tell you something? No, I don't think it is, because it's going to take people so long to retrain, but I hope it is. I desperately, let me tell you, Paul, by the way, if anybody's listening to this and you want to get a total sucker, I am in the market. I will pay you hundreds of dollars for some stupid thing that's going to increase my APM by 10 points. I've bought everything like that. I've used them. They've never been worth it. And I still believe. So I would love
is that hundreds of dollars for the item itself, or hundreds of dollars to invest in the company? Here's $150. I hope you do well.
No, but guys, does the esports accessories market become the golf market? And what I mean by that is, like, golfers will pay ridiculous amounts of money for anything that, like, they think will let them hit the ball 10 yards further. You know what I mean? Like a ball that's a little bit better, clubs that are custom fit, bags and shoes, and like the volume of equipment around golf to me is staggering, and training aids and God knows what. Like, are we going to see that kind of evolution in esports where people are paying hundreds of dollars to be 1% better?
I can see it.
Not only that,
I think the esports landscape lends itself to that, simply because it is technology based. So as technology advances, people who have the latest equipment that gives them even a fraction of a second advantage will inherently be better if they're at the top of their game.
I hope so. I am desperate for anything that will let me substitute money for time to improve my atrocious aim.
But in some ways, it, like, if you look at the golf market, most of these things don't improve your game at all, right? They sell based on a promise of improving your game. Is that something we want to see in esports? That's
purchased
right?
by people who think simply that buying that peripheral will improve their game right away without necessarily putting in the hours necessary to be better.
I think Paul's right, because what it really is, golf is a lifestyle, right? Like, yes, golf is a sport, and you can argue about how fun of a sport it is, but it's a sport. But it's also, golf's really a lifestyle. It's why you have golf apparel. It's why you have golf clubs. It's like, I meant that as in, like, the club where you go to drink after playing golf and not the things you hit the ball with. But esports is the same way. Esports is lifestyle. I mean, I sit in I shouldn't say stupid because I actually really like it, but I sit in my gaming chair. I don't need a gaming chair at all to be a better gamer. Literally, I think I actually might be better with just a regular, more comfy. But, like, I'm all in, man. I have 3 gaming chairs and I rotate them. I'm like, well, this one is better for first-person shooters, and this one's
really
better.
Though? Like, you came to this conclusion on your own?
It's the lifestyle. It's like getting in a cockpit, or like getting in, like, do leather seats make your car go faster? No. But do you want leather seats in your fancy car? Of course. It's that type of thing, So yeah, I hope so. In fact, I'm surprised we haven't seen more weirdness in sort of these lifestyle accessories. And I think it's largely constrained by the fact that gamers are so savvy versus other sports industries that they can detect the difference in performance is not significant. And
let me ask this question. Let me ask this last question before we move on to the next topic. Will this, if you guys, based on what you know about business and just the landscape of how things evolve, would you expect this kind of innovation to come from a large company like Logitech, or would you expect it to come from a startup or a company that's emerging?
Emerging. Stay tuned. Paul and I are going to found something after this call, right, Paul?
Totally.
I could see that.
I think I see it a little bit differently. I think you will see innovation from emerging companies, but I think at the high end, like pushing the science forward kind of thing, is always going to require the resources of a very big outfit like Logitech. Now, the beauty of Logitech's position that they're in today is they could go and acquire a lot of the little innovation that's being developed in smaller companies, right? Like if they realize company X has this really cool little thing that could complement their portfolio, it's easy for them to go and acquire that company and just sort of bring it in-house and slap a Logitech logo on it. I think William made a really good point, though, is that the audience in esports, I think, is fundamentally different. That we will see a ton of innovation. We will see a lot of proliferation of accessories and peripherals and training aids and tools to make people better. But I think unlike golf and other sports, you will not be able to get away for long with something that doesn't actually work. Because the audience is more cynical, the audience is more savvy. And I think the Logitechs of the world realize that, and it's why they're succeeding. They don't pander to that crowd. They really try and build good stuff. But I think you will get a lot of fakers trying to, call it, innovate in this market and bring products to market that will fail because they don't realize or don't understand the target market sufficiently.
William, last word on this?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Paul, I always like Paul. I think he does the best wrap-ups. But I guess my final word on this is I think the availability of tracking your own performance data in games is so deep, right? Like after I play golf, I basically know, was I -3 or -2? After I play a game of Overwatch, I know, was I play of the game? I can look in and see, my damage stats. I know my progress towards achievements. There's so much more data and performance visibility and feedback in gaming. It makes it harder for deceptive or, feel-good products only to survive. So I think that piece that Paul said was, I guess echoing what I said, was very intelligent. You're going to have to see the innovation be meaningful and improvement to stick around. But I, for one, hope for a lot of innovation here because I just want to spend more money on stuff to make me a better gamer. Like I can't, and I honestly do not believe I feel alone here. Like I am already, if somebody listens to this and you have a weird gel cooling pack that's going to get my wrist all icy for extra precision, like I'm there, man. I'll buy 10, because
yeah.
I want to believe. I want to, because it's just, people don't look at it. People aren't looking at the ergonomics of game playing right now in a really meaningful way. People, like, as much as we talk about mechanical keyboards for input accuracy, we're still using WASD as an input, which can't be the best way to move here. The layout it's off center for your fingers. Fundamentally, look at your keyboard right now. Look at where W is versus the D versus the A. It's not like, there has to be innovation.
Blasphemy.
I'm excited.
Blasphemy, yeah. William. It's perfect. It's perfect as it is. Blasphemy, I say.
That's a conversation for another day. I wonder what the layout will be for our next topic. This is the topic that I've been looking forward to talking about all podcasts. We still have a couple topics after this, but this is going to be, without a doubt, the biggest deep dive that we've ever done on the podcast, as it should be. William, I am coming to you publicly to either be a professional esports competitor in this genre or at least a caster. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard the news. We're going to talk about it here. A new esport is on the scene, okay? A brand new esport has emerged with more than $280,000 in prizes, with 10 tournaments across Europe, including Gamescom and Paris Games Week. This game sold 1 million copies in its first 10 days of availability last year. And that game, folks, is Farming Simulator. I cannot wait. William, tell me you don't already have a Team Genji Farming Simulator.
Oh, we have 3. We're going all in. We've announced a stream team. We have an academy roster. We're actually opening a school to train future Farming Simulator pros. But I mean, this goes to two things. One is, we talked about, just a little bit earlier, are we going to see people cashing in on esports? This, in my mind, is the definition of cashing in, right? And look, I'm going to come right out there and say, I have played Farming Simulator. I am not somebody who doesn't know what the game is about or saying, oh, you can't make farming an esport. I mean, I played farming. You very well, that game is not designed to be an esport. It's not that I don't know what the game is or how it operates. It doesn't have the characteristics of an esport. I do think it's quite clever that you see this company getting a ton of, I think probably when they made this announcement, they were aware of the ridiculousness of it and calculated that in the PR pickup and media attention it would generate. And I think in that sense, the $280K they spent looks very well spent, because I guarantee you nobody was going to talk about Farming Simulator outside of the passionate subculture of farming enthusiasts, right? And now we are, and maybe now you're downloading it on the Steam sale or what have you. So, I think it's a savvy use of a cash in for sure. But look, guys, I mean, this is, let's be honest, Halo isn't even cutting it as an esport right now here. I mean, Farming Simulator has a way to go.
So William, are you saying this is a marketing gimmick? Is that basically what you're saying?
Come on.
Yeah, I mean, but obviously I am, but it is also
but
interesting.
A successful one, like you said, right? This is a successful marketing campaign.
I actually totally disagree. I totally disagree with that. And Arda, you should know that if you watch any amount of CBC in Canada or or TSN, every so often on TV, they'll have like lumberjack games, right? Like guys who are, who the fastest to chop down a tree or to saw a log in half. And it's weirdly entertaining. It really is. Like,
yeah, for once a year though. Look, I'm part of the Classic Tetris World Championships, okay? I love that tournament, but even I would admit that cannot be sustained as a year-long tournament that people will continuously tune into. Will Farming Simulator be interesting once a year to the casual esports audience, or maybe even break into some sort of level of mainstream? Sure, people might definitely enjoy watching a 1-hour broadcast of it every single year, but is it going to be sustainable for people to actually want to watch throughout the entire year? Maybe you'll get a cottage industry of fans, a subset of fans that will definitely be interested. I mean, the other thing is this has already happened. Like, tournaments already happen at agricultural events. So this is not like the first time that they're doing competitive farming simulator events. This is the first time it's actually going to be blown out as an esport with prize money, etc. But I just don't see it as something that can be sustained every single week to a large audience, and people will continuously want to watch, or a large number of people that will want to watch it every single week. Yeah, I want to watch the Lumberjack Championships once a year.
Look, I think Farming Simulator doesn't have to have a tournament every single week to be successful as an esport, though. In fact, I'll go out on a limb and I'll say I think Farming Simulator will have more staying power as an esport than Fortnite. I think we will be watching Farming Simulator for more years than we will watch Fortnite esports.
So you're putting the prize money aside, you're putting the magnitude of the game aside. You think just in number of years, we will still have a Farming Simulator esports ecosystem in 20 years, let's say, or whatever X amount of years?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that will have staying power. And it will have a niche audience. I mean, I saw another story this week. We're not talking about it, but about DDR esports, right? And I put all of these kind of in the same category. DDR, Tetris, Farming Simulator. They're all kind of niche, even though Farming Simulator does have a large player base. But they're all kind of niche. And because of that, they will have a hardcore audience that really enjoys this, that finds it entertaining, and will come back year after year or however often they do these tournaments to watch it, regardless of if the prize money is $1 million or $100 million or $500,000. They will find it entertaining regardless. So while I do agree that there is some part of this that is marketing gimmick to get attention for the game, I actually think this will survive. I actually think this will work.
But therein lies the rub, Paul. So first of all, I want to say three things. One is thank you for bringing up Dance Dance Revolution, because in case you don't know, I'm very good at Dance Dance Revolution.
You are? Are you really?
I would pay good money to see that. I really would.
Frighteningly good at Dance Dance Revolution. Like, we're gonna have to. This is a whole separate conversation. But please bring me more Dance Dance Revolution. I was known as the Claw. Stream. I was known as the Claw around the arcades of Boston.
The Claw.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm definitely curious why.
When the pressure came on, my hand would strangely rise up like a claw while I was dancing. But so let's throw that out there. But then like what you said, the hardcore audience will be back regardless if the pricing is $1 million or just prestige. That's why this is a marketing grab, because I have no problem with there being farming simulator competitions for hardcore players for whom this is, and there may even be enough players to sustain the scene, and clearly it seems that way. I get it when you hear that, like, the company considering the return on investment, they're going to have the same people showing up to their tournaments with or without that prizing pool. That's why the prizing pool is a grab for general attention and awareness. You know what I mean? It's not sustainable to have this sort of prizing for Farming League moving ahead.
But before we move on from this topic, let's pick a game. If Farming Simulator is becoming an esport, hypothetically, any game can become an esport. I might be putting you guys on the spot here, but pick a game that you would love to see become an esport, ridiculous or not. I'll start. I would love to see, and I know that Games Done Quick is something that exists. They do a great job putting on events, often with a charity spin. I would love to see more speedrun esports. I would love to be being at like the World Speedrun Championships where people are speedrunning games of all eras. I think that would be really cool.
I would love to see Heroes of the Storm as an esport. I know that.
Ouch.
No, that was cheeky, but it's really true. I really wish I could pick anything.
You're gonna start the whole thread on Reddit. That's you.
Greatest game ever made, and I stand by it. It's unbelievable. But actually, Arda, I'm with you. I think we should do a whole podcast. I'm big into speedrunning. I know quite a lot about the speedrunning scene. I've actually looked into it pretty extensively. There's a big opportunity. Speedrunning needs to be broadened into something called challenge running, which we can talk about what that is. But I think
not just finishing games quickly, like sort of challenged based or like
exactly
doing certain things in the games. Yeah, that's great.
Exactly. So there's a whole broadening of the category that needs to happen. But I'm extremely bullish on challenge running because it opens up. It's the sprinting of esports or the weightlifting of esports. It opens up a lot more room for people to play games and get good without needing the barrier of finding a team and teammates. And also, candidly, it turns great games into competitive activities. I love Mario Odyssey. I love the fact that now there's a reason to want to get really good at it, as you saw with that incredible Darker Side run at SGDQ. You know, I love that, and I want to see more great single player games being given a sustained life through a competitive scene.
Paul?
I played a game called Overcooked 2 over the holidays, and I think it'd be fun just for the pure entertainment value to have it as an esport.
I think that would be a fun one. That's a great date night game, by the way. Overcooked 2 is so much fun. I play with the wife. It's terrific. Let's move on to we got two more topics here. This one, Paul, I think you're going to have a lot of opinions on this one. The NCAA and esports. Collegiate esports, certainly, William, something near and dear to your heart as well. Always a topic, and always the elephant in the room as it pertains to collegiate esports is how will, if at all ever, will the NCAA introduce itself to the world of esports? So what has happened in the last 7 days is that Marquette University has become the first college in America to offer esports as a varsity sport next fall. They will be the first program in a major athletic conference to do so in the country. Now, Utah, Missouri, and Ohio State already have similar programs, but also Robert Morris has offered esports as a scholarship program since 2014, and Marquette has had an esports club since 2015 and competed in Big East sponsored events and tournaments, but now it is a varsity sport. So that is the big leap that has been unprecedented thus far. Now, the official team will hold tryouts, have regular practices, and hire coaches, a process that is just beginning. The athletic department will oversee the team in collaboration with the College of Arts and Sciences, the Division of Student Affairs, and the Office of Admissions. Now, here is a quote that came out a couple days ago from NCAA President Mark Emmert, who has recently expressed concern over esports and sports betting as well. This is the esports component of the quote. "We know a lot of the content is hugely misogynistic. We know that some of the content is really violent. We don't particularly embrace games where the objective is to blow your opponent's head off. We know there are serious concerns about health and wellness around those games." William, let's start with you because you do have the college connection of the three of us here. When you hear these comments and also when you hear what Marquette is doing, what's going on in your mind?
Well, you know, I hate to lump this in the category earlier of Logitech, shares is up 6%. But look, the bottom line here is this is another case of these are valid competitive activities. About half of college students, engage in esports by most measures. If you look at it, I mean, it is the demographic. If you look at just network traffic on a Friday night at colleges, it's basically all something unmentionable or League of Legends, So, this to me is just no surprise. This is people moving in, and Marquette College is smart. We wouldn't be talking about Marquette College if not for this, right? They saw it is going to be sort of smaller schools that move first. But look, I'm not even sure the characterization of them being first to varsity is accurate. I'm aware of things that are happening in the Northeast right now. There are going to be varsity programs launching in the Northeast this fall. Marquette might have been first to announce, but I think it's going to be tied to Marquette for things like this.
On the college side, I think it's interesting that you hear a lot of these colleges announcing esports programs, right? Like clubs and things like that. The varsity kind of sport, official varsity sport, is a next level up. But what you rarely see, and I think is still missing on the college front, is schools really thinking about how esports programs, like varsity programs and clubs, complement on the education side, because I think there really is opportunities on the education side to teach esports and the business of esports. I mean, I'm talking to literally two professors of esports here, but I think you rarely see colleges thinking about it in a very holistic approach, or at least you don't read about it in that way, looking at the entire spectrum of esports and saying, okay, how can we get kids playing and competing, but how can we incorporate it into the education as well? And I think that evolution will be interesting to watch. On the NCAA front, I thought this was great news. First of all, I mean, the comment is so thick with hypocrisy because I don't know how shooting a guy's head off is any different than two guys bashing into each other or taking their heads off in football, or, you know.
We should specify in a video game, obviously.
Right, in a video game, right? Like I don't understand how he views the kind of, call it, violence in a video game differently from the very physical violence you get in a lot of traditional sports that are sanctioned by the NCAA. So, you know, to me, there's quite a bit of hypocrisy there, or at least a lack of understanding there. And I think that's a good thing, in the sense that the NCAA's very tight grip on traditional sports, many would argue, is not good for the schools or the sports themselves. That it creates a ton of unfairness for the players, the students, and mostly a lot of benefit for the NCAA themselves. I think the NCAA staying out of esports here is a real blessing in disguise. It's a real blessing in disguise. I don't think esports needs them. I think it can be successful without them, and I think it will be successful without them. So the longer they don't think it's important, or the longer the NCAA thinks it's not viable or interesting for them, the better, if you ask me. Keep this guy in charge. Let's hope he doesn't realize sort of what's in front of his nose.
So another elephant in the room, so to speak, is just the transfer of money, right? Because under NCAA regulations, student athletes are generally not allowed to accept money derived from activities based on their athletic ability. Now, particularly as it pertains to gaming, you could certainly see situations in which these competitors play in tournaments on behalf of the university, representing Marquette, let's say, but then on the side stream and make revenue like that. So there is a lot to work out in terms of, if the NCAA were to ever get involved, how that would affect streaming revenue and sponsorship revenue, et cetera, because those options seem a lot more viable to that ecosystem than do perhaps an athlete playing football.
But
right?
Does anyone here think that shouldn't be a thing?
Well, the NCAA might
No, I know
their rules.
The NCAA will, which is also why I think they should stay out of it, and why it's good that they're out of it. But does anyone here think someone playing esports in a college should not be able to stream and make money on the side, for example?
No, I think that they should be able to. My personal opinion, yeah.
I mean, I'm so tempted to play devil's advocate here, because you can make the exact same arguments about why, you know, people shouldn't be paid for playing football in college. But the truth is, I just don't believe it. You know, the reality is, when you are good enough at something to attract an audience, you are generating value, and you should be allowed to monetize it. And sorry if that was a little bit of free market capitalism injected into the business of esports podcast.
Yeah, to me, the NCAA dipping their fingers into someone else's earning potential, I don't think it's right, and I think it would be bad for the industry, more importantly. So forget personal opinions, mine or anyone else's. I just think it would be bad for the industry. It would hamper the industry. Imagine if all these, an entire generation of students going to school, playing esports, but can't stream when they get home. Like, what does that do to Twitch and the streaming industry? What is that? The repercussions of the NCAA getting involved and imposing their rules, I think, makes everything messy and cumbersome, and really hurts the industry as a whole.
One thing that we talked about this previously on another podcast, about esports and the Olympics, and a general question of whether or not esports needed to be a part of the Olympics. Who needs who more? Do the Olympics need esports? Do esports need the Olympics? Is that a similar situation here? Because we could definitely see an ecosystem where esports becomes too big to deny, and the NCAA will want to take action or do something in the realm of esports at some time, whether it's 5 years from now, even 3, 10, whatever it is. We can certainly see that conversation. It's already starting, but we can certainly see steps being taken, but more so because esports is too big to deny, as opposed to esports wanting that sort of attention from the NCAA to begin with. What do we think about that, William?
Arda, like I always come back to the same point and the same point about this again and again, which is like, and I hate to give such a generic answer, but like this is, a rising tide phenomenon situation. You know what I mean? This is the case where like everybody who piles into this is eventually going to do well. Everybody who doesn't pile into this is eventually going to wish they piled in earlier. Do we need the Olympics? Do we need these sort of legitimacy? I think it would help get things bigger quicker if they piled in earlier. I also think we'd inherit a lot of baggage from the way those things operate for traditional sports or traditional activities, and how much that can hold down the flexibility and I think fairness of the current ecosystem. But, beyond that, like this is going to be big no matter what people do. It's going to be big whether or not you stand in the way or jump on in. And I think that underpins sort of all of my comments in today's podcast.
Paul?
Yeah, I don't think the NCAA is going to make a decision based on anything other than greed here, right? If there's enough money in it for them, they will get involved. And the good news is they don't realize the potential just yet, or at least they don't realize the immediate return that's possible for them. It's a short-sighted approach right now, and I would like to think, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I would like to think it's partly because they feel threatened. That esports in some ways is a threat to traditional sports and their dominance there and their cash machine there, and instead of embracing the threat and trying to bring it under their wing, which would be good for them and bad for the industry, but good for them, they are taking a much more defensive approach, and the result is, okay, let's try and bash it and poo-poo it and hope that it goes away. But I would like to think they feel threatened here, because that's the only way I can really explain this kind of reaction. These are smart people there who have built an incredibly profitable business in the NCAA. They must know that there's potential here, and I think they're scared, and I think this is the knee-jerk reaction to that fear.
We'll end on this for at least this topic, because I'm sure this is not the last time we're going to talk about the NCAA and esports. This is an excerpt from an article on ESPN from last year. Collegiate esports may have good bones, but it lacks rules, regulations, and enforcement mechanisms that apply to all games and all schools. These are areas in which the NCAA could add enormous value. For all that can be criticized about the NCAA, it is also the only regulatory body in a position to affect change across the entire collegiate sports landscape. Perhaps most importantly, the NCAA's first move wasn't to simply apply existing rules and regimes to esports. It was to ask for help in learning about the esports space in order to decide upon the best course of action. So, like I said, this is not going to be the last time we talk about this. We're going to continue to follow it here on the Business of Esports and talk about it as things develop. Our last conversation, which might also be a long one, is we have also discussed the idea of Twitch as a platform and where it is in the context of gaming, and whether or not competitors can exist or emerge. And Caffeine, which is backed by Fox, seems to be gaining traction as a competitor to Twitch. Twitch, of course, still leads the market and gained mainstream attention at least in the last year for sure, with the rise of Fortnite, several leagues streaming their games on the platform, even major brands taking to Twitch for IRL streams like Nike, which we talked about on a previous podcast. From Digiday, Caffeine is an emerging competitor backed by Fox, founded by Apple TV designers Ben Kieran and Sam Roberts in April 2016. It raised $146 million, including a $100 million investment from 21st Century Fox in September of 2018. Currently has about 70 employees. Now, Twitch has about 3 million streamers per month. Caffeine's user base is still growing, albeit small, about 147,000 downloads since their June 2017 launch. But features such as low latency and the small but growing community are attractive to streamers. William, let's start with you on this one. Caffeine, where do you see it in the landscape? Are we ripe for competition? And will we truly have a big competitor to Twitch in 2019?
I think, wasn't it our very first podcast where I was saying Twitch is extremely vulnerable and you're going to see those guys really struggle over the next 2 or 3 years? I mean, I am so... Like, I almost want to do see my original podcast because it's just so clear to me. Twitch's dominance is on content control. Your loyalty is not to Twitch, to the platform at all. It's to the streamers on it. If they go somewhere else or somebody is somewhere else, you don't think to yourself, oh God, I wish this was on Twitch. You just go to where that person is, and to consume their personality. There are huge rivals coming into the space. Disney, YouTube, other parties are pushing in this. Not to mention Chinese potential conflicts from, Tencent and companies over there. I just, if I were Twitch, I'd be terrified right now. And the fact that Caffeine, which is candidly should be the competitor you can beat the most easily, right? Because it's US centered like you, it's in your backyard. And it's not, fundamentally, yes, their tech is pretty impressive, but their tech isn't that much better than Twitch's tech by any, stretch of the imagination. You should be able to beat these guys, but it goes to show you that I don't care if I'm I don't care if I'm watching on Caffeine or Twitch. I just watch when the guy I like is on, and I stream wherever they're willing to stream. So, I think, if Twitch had a killer point of defensibility other than its content, I would feel differently, but they can't own all gaming content. There's always going to be other people who are going to be able to chip away at the edges. Just like, by the way, Netflix is discovering this. They thought they could own all digital comm then, and all of a sudden Amazon came in, Disney's coming in. I see Twitch as the exact same position as Netflix right now. I'll flip it the other way and I'll say I'm surprised Caffeine's numbers aren't more impressive given the amount of investment coming in. I think the number of downloads you quoted is they're basically getting a download $1 invested. I would expect them to have done a little bit better than that. But I don't mean that to be a knock on anyone at Caffeine, because honestly, I think they're probably coming into an incredibly hard market. And the fact that they're getting any traction at all is immensely exciting. And I think it's a good thing for the streamers, because competition amongst platforms like Twitch and Caffeine is going to result in more bidding, more bid wars and more benefits for the talent on the platform. It's going to result in more people able to earn a living as a streamer, and it's going to result in more streamers earning more money. I think it's a net positive for the ecosystem.
This is one of those things that I'm surprised Caffeine hasn't done more, though. I think Twitch is not in as much trouble as William says. My view is Twitch, the longer that time goes without a real competitor to Twitch in North America, at least, if we limit the conversation to North America, because it's a little bit simpler that way. But in North America, if there's no real competitor to Twitch in the next year, 2 years, I'm a little bit afraid Twitch is going to run away with it, right? Because at some point it becomes more than just the content on the platform. People just naturally go to Twitch to watch streams, and so if someone moves, unless they have a very dedicated audience, people, the organic eyeballs that are looking for gaming content are just going to come to Twitch. My surprise, though, is today, like William said, where I agree, is Twitch is vulnerable in that content is really their only advantage. So why are competitors not really pressing hard there? Why is Caffeine, with the backing that they have and the resources that they potentially have access to, why are they not going and luring away dozens if not hundreds, of the top Twitch streamers, right? And really making a go at this. Because today, Caffeine's real only selling point from my perspective is I'm a small streamer. If I want to get started on Twitch today, chances are it's very hard. No one's going to notice me because everyone's watching Ninja. But on a platform like Caffeine, I can go and stream, and if the top guy there is getting only 200 viewers and I have 5 or 10, it's not so bad. There's potential for me to grow there. Twitch seems very daunting right now because the difference between the top guys and the bottom guys is just massive. That difference is quite a bit smaller on a platform like Caffeine, and so it may be more welcoming to new streamers. But to really threaten Twitch in a significant way, my view is Caffeine needs to be doing what the Epic Store is doing with Steam. And you know, I've talked a little bit about that on the blog and these game distribution platforms, but there's a similar war happening in that Epic is now paying developers to lure exclusives onto their platform. So they just actually landed Metro Exodus. I don't know if you guys saw that, but Metro Exodus was on Steam, and Epic said, no, we don't want it on Steam. We'll pay you money. Come distribute the game exclusively on the Epic Store. And they literally pulled the game off of Steam. People had bought it on Steam. They literally pulled the game off of Steam, and it's now an exclusive on the Epic Store. Why is Caffeine not doing that with content creators? To me, doesn't make sense to me. They are not going to win this war organically. And there's no technology I see here that is so groundbreaking that they're going to win this war organically. So I'm not that afraid for Twitch because I don't think Caffeine realizes what it's going to take to win here.
I think that's absolutely 100% correct. It's got to be either a league or a top streamer that's exclusive to Caffeine, and then the eyeballs will move.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I quite like the Caffeine guys. I can think of lots of reasons to defend them. I can say maybe they don't want to get into a bidding war for talent because they know they're going to lose. Maybe they think there's a strategy around platform loyalty and they're better off casting a net wide and developing, star personalities in-house. Maybe they just are waiting to preserve the powder in their capital, for a big partnership or, strategic initiatives that are coming down the line that we're not aware of. I can think of lots of favorable reasons why they might have chosen not to do the poach strategy yet. But fundamentally, Paul, I agree with you. I mean, the right move here, if it were me, I would pick a game. I would negotiate a very attractive deal with the publisher to get exclusive rights to that game. Or I would negotiate a deal with all the top streamers and, pull audience that way. I would take that sort of approach. And I would try to carve out a little fiefdom and scale from there. And I am surprised nobody's doing that. But by the way, just because nobody's doing it today does not mean it won't be done. So,
No, and William, you make a great point. I don't know if you ever watched Dr. Disrespect from maybe like a year ago, but about a year ago, he was talking about how he was alluding to the fact that, and he often talks about he's the face of Twitch, like that's kind of his line. And I think at some point in time about a year ago, he was a little bit unhappy with Twitch and what was going on there. And so he would joke or allude to the fact that he's talking to other people and maybe there's a deal that's going to happen with other people, and everyone thought he might go to Mixer. Here's the question for you guys in light of the conversation we had last week about Dr. Disrespect. If you're Dr. Disrespect's new agent at CAA, and Caffeine comes along and says, come to our platform, here's a bag of money. Do you tell the doc, take it, move your audience there and run with it? Or do you say, wait a second, this is a risk. All the audience is on Twitch. I know it's a lot of money they're offering you, but this is a safer bet. Stay where you are.
No, I think you take it. And another thing that I point to is Dr. Disrespect was the most unhappy, or at least publicly, about the ad rolls for Ninja New Year's, right? Like he sent out that tweet and he was unhappy more generally just with Twitch's practices, right?
Yeah.
So that sort of animosity already exists between Dr. Disrespect and whatever decisions have been made with Twitch. So to me, if it's a substantial amount of money, and I believe that my audience will follow me wherever I go, and it's not that difficult for them to change from one platform to another as a viewer, which I assume it would not be, to me, that's a no-brainer.
I guess that's the crux of the question, though, right? Will they follow? And if you're the guy advising the doc, is that too much of a risk, right? Is there too much friction there to say, take the money and run?
I'm going to say at least, William, comment on this after this point right here. I'd say at least 90%, if not 95 or 100% of Doc's viewership are watching him because of him, not because he's on Twitch.
Yeah, the platform is incidental, obviously. Just like you don't care. I mean, like, let me give an example to make it clear to our listeners. Do you care if your favorite comedy is on ABC or CBS? If you heard that, I don't even know what's a popular comedy now, Modern Family was switching to a different network. Yeah, there'd be friction. It would be a pain. You'd get the time slot wrong. You'd go to the old channel. You'd get frustrated. But is it fundamentally a different comedy because it's now streaming on ABC versus CBS? No, it's not. It's the same content. So people will follow the doc. But more to the point, the sort of drift or defection strategy we're talking about, not every top streamer has to say yes to it. It's fine if the doc says no, because then if I'm Caffeine or whoever else is doing the poaching, I can go on down the list. I can go to the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. And some people will say yes. Some people will look at the calculus and say it's worth the risk. And that's enough to start prying away a presence in a meaningful fashion.
The only issue that I see is if it's more difficult to watch Caffeine than it is Twitch. The reason why ABC, CBS, etc. doesn't necessarily matter is because I can press 2 buttons on my remote control and get to that channel. But if it was more difficult, if the barrier to entry was higher, as in like I have to download more and it's a little bit more difficult to navigate and I'm not happy with that, we have short attention spans. So it has to be easy for me to consume the content. But if that stays equal, it doesn't matter if it's Caffeine, Twitch, Mixer, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. What matters is it's easy for me to watch. It's easy for me to get the content I want. And I will follow that person if that's the case.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this evolves in the sense that I would love to see this kind of war really pick up pace. Because to me, that's when this gets really interesting, right? Like when all these companies start bidding for the streamers. And the interesting part here is, I think, unlike TV, William, although I think your analogy was a really good one, and you're right, the content does hold the weight, most of the weight here. These guys could, if they wanted to, the doc could, if he wanted to, stream simultaneously to Twitch, Caffeine, Mixer, and YouTube, for that matter, all at the same time, right? From a technology perspective, there's absolutely nothing stopping him. There may be something in his contract with Twitch that stops him. I think there is in the Twitch partner contract. But from a technology perspective, none of that is impossible. And so at some point, when do we start seeing essentially a contract war, right? Where it's the power is in how you lock up the content and what you pay for it. I would really love to see that happen, and I would love to see how that escalates, right? Does it get out of control? Do people start offering crazy dollars? Are people, making bets because they're betting on the next 10 years of streaming growth? I would love to see that be a phenomenon the same way it's happening on the game distribution side.
Completely agreed. I mean, the other thing I wonder about is, when does the star creation stop? Because I think right now, it's still like, I don't think, if you think of like mainstream celebrities, right? It's not like every year 30 A-list celebrities get added. You know what I mean? It's a relatively static and constant pool. I mean, Tom Cruise was big when I was in, middle school. He's still big. He still headlines films. There's a certain stasis at the top that settles into calcified industries around celebrities and talent. And another question for me is, when will that settle into esports? Because we've seen that a little bit with names like PewDiePie and Dr. Disrespect that don't go away, that are part of the zeitgeist and are sort of grandfathered in. But how much more A-list? We're still in a period of rapid A-list creation. Dr. Lupo, and maybe I'm going to get judged here for not knowing enough about esports. My understanding is he wasn't really a presence 2 years ago. Even a year ago, he wasn't really. He was just starting to grow a year ago.
He only became big when he started playing Fortnite with Ninja, really.
Exactly. Like when does the calcification happen so that a new game comes in, and rather than a whole crop of new celebrities getting created around that game, it's just your old favorites move over? Just like sometimes Tom Cruise plays Jack Ryan and sometimes he plays Mission Impossible,
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. I agree that at some point that A-list creation will slow down. The only difference here is movies are movies, right? Like an A-lister who acts in one movie can act in the next movie the next year and stays an A-lister because he stays sort of at top of people's mind. The difference with esports is the games change so drastically, right? The doc could have decided never to play Fortnite and may have faded into obscurity. I don't know, right? Not likely to happen because his personality drives it. But pick an example that's not as personality driven as the doc, that may have an Overwatch audience, let's say, and they decide to not play Fortnite and Overwatch is not the thing anymore. Do they fade into obscurity or at least go from A-lister to B-lister?
Right. You know what I can see happen, and this is a stretch, but imagine if you were a streamer, okay? And let's say you're a Fortnite streamer and you stream Fortnite on Twitch, but now you want to experiment in streaming in a different game title. What if you were exclusive to Fortnite streaming on Twitch, but then Caffeine comes and says, we will take the rights to you streaming PUBG or the rights to Farming Simulator. I'm joking with that, but you know what I mean? Like another title. So I could see an ecosystem where just like actors who are able to work for different companies on a per project basis, perhaps these streaming companies will do the same thing where either they have an overall exclusive deal with a streamer for all of their content for a certain amount of time, or maybe it will be fragmented such that certain titles or certain types of streaming, maybe IRL streams, maybe gaming streams, maybe titles of games, will be exclusive to certain chunks.
You know, Arda, your point's good, and there's precedent, right? Because that's essentially what happened with movies, right? You had these studio systems where the actors were essentially owned by the studios. They could only make movies with the studio they were signed to. And
they have a first look deal, right? Like if I'm Dr. Lupo and suddenly I want to stream Anthem, let's just say, well, Twitch has the first right of refusal. Now we want to sign you to this. Here's money. Or no, you can go ahead and shop that elsewhere. And then suddenly Dr. Lupo streaming Anthem on Caffeine exclusively, but still streaming Fortnite for a predetermined amount of days per week or hours per week on Twitch. We could certainly see that happening.
I think we could. As the audience grows, I definitely think that kind of bifurcation, that kind of that ability to really split out audiences by games and streamer and things like that could happen. My view is it could be a little bit unfortunate. The only winners there might be the lawyers handling all the contracts. But, again, there's precedent. That's the movie business, essentially, right? Where now you could make a movie with 20th Century Fox and then go do one with DreamWorks and there's nothing stopping you, and it could be comedy here and action there and no one cares. But it did start the way esports or these platforms are today, these streaming platforms are today, where if you were an MGM guy and the MGM was the studio you made movies with, you had a contract with them to do 10 movies and you couldn't go do movies with any other studio. And so that's the way the business in streaming and esports is today. But I absolutely believe that there's a future that's potentially quite a bit more messy or free.
Here's what I know for sure. The three of us will be the Ryan Seacrest of this new world.
I'm gunning for that so hard.
I'll come out there.
Does that make me the Kelly Ripa or you the Kelly Ripa?
Probably me, the Kelly Ripa. I feel like. But let's poke that one to the listeners. Yeah. Tweet at us who is the Kelly Ripa.
Exactly. Yeah. Who's the Kelly Ripa? Let's bring this back on track. I think that's our cue to wrap up the podcast here. Some great conversation, a lot of meaty topics on this episode. And by the way, we are going to bring you this podcast every single week. It's going to be a weekly podcast diving deep, giving valuable opinions and analysis on the biggest stories in the business of esports. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. When you leave a 5-star rating and a favorable review, it helps others who like esports and business find this podcast. Follow us on Twitter at BizEsports. Go to the website, thebusinessofesports.com. Every single day, you will have a list of all the links so that you're completely caught up and you're ready to listen to this particular podcast. And William, we got to talk offline because my farming simulator career is just beginning.
Oh yeah, 100%. We got to go train right now, Arda. It's time for practice.
Thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Business of Esports podcast. Check us out at thebusinessofesports.com and on Twitter at BizEsports.